Hey guys, it's just Patrick here again, just shooting a quick video for you guys. I'm going to give you today my 5 biggest tips on how you can immediately remove your lower back pain or your pain in your body today. Good morning, Facebook listeners. I thought I'd come to you with a couple of tips this morning. We've been giving you a lot of information surrounding what's going on in the clinic, but I actually thought I'd bring some more value to you guys today. So today's topic, my five biggest pieces of advice that I can give to people that have got pain to immediately have an impact on that pain that you're currently having. So we're going to keep it really simple. I find that the secret to success is to show up. It basically means the secret to success is to do more than what you were doing before and to show up everyone else. So if you can outdo everyone else in these 5 things, the likelihood is you're already going to immediately impact the level of pain that you're having. So first thing we will understand is basically, why does pain occur? Pretty much all pain occurs for a reason. It's a way of your body to communicate that something in your body is not working the way that it was designed to do, or a tissue is damaged. And most often the reason for that is there's something in our environment that is either causing those tissues to swell or injure or tear, etc. And it might be an injury, it might be your diet, it might be your alcohol consumption, it may even just be an emotional thing. Now, our emotions will affect our physiology. However, we're going to look at the 5 top tips that you can do that will start to change the internal environment of your body and actually start to impact the level of pain that you're having. Number 1, hot and cold. Now, the reason why I've said hot and cold is depending on the type of injury that you're going to have, it's going to depend on whether hot or cold is going to work best. What we basically know is that with pretty much every injury, there's going to be some level of inflammation. Now, inflammation is not always a bad thing. Let's take an example. If we tear a muscle and blood starts flowing into that muscle, that is a good thing because we need to get those nutrients into the muscle in order to allow it to heal. So you may find that with hot and cold, with certain injuries, inflammation-based injuries, you're actually going to want to use more cold. So say, for example, stuff like arthritis, and in the first instance of an injury. So for the first 6 to 8 hours, you don't want to apply anything, but then afterwards you can start to apply ice for the next 24 to 48 hours, and then you can rotate between hot and cold. Basically, what we're going to allow to do during this process, the hot is going to allow blood to flow into the area, bringing all those nutrients into the tissue so the tissue can start to heal. The ice is then going to flood it back out again, so you can then start to get rid of the stagnant tissues, which has got all the waste products in, and get rid of those, and they're going to then get wasted and taken out of the body somewhere else. So hot and cold, really, really important. Try and use your hot and cold in order to improve the amount of blood flow going into the area and actually speed up that healing process. Number 2, one of the other ways that you can immediately improve pain is rest. It seems really simple, but the old first aid training of rest, ice, compress and elevate works really well. And the reason being is if you've got a tear or a break or an inflammation in a tissue, and all of a sudden you keep pulling that tissue too much and load it too heavily, if you load it too heavily, those tissues will then not be able to heal. Let's just take an example. If you cut your hand, have a paper cut on your hand, and it is bleeding, but then it starts to scab and the cut starts to close, that healing process is then going to start to begin. If I pull that cut open, that cut is essentially going to start to bleed again, and essentially what we're going to start to see is that healing process is going to start reversing. So if you're constantly irritating a tissue that is trying to heal by pulling it open or overusing it, what we're going to start to see is that that's going to have a huge impact in the progress of, 1, the healing process, but also the volumes of pain that you're going to have. Now, this one might seem a little bit counterintuitive because what we basically just said is rest, but what we mean is relative rest, which basically means that we want to unload the tissues to a certain extent. But what we know is in order to actually help proper healing to occur, good morning, Ariel, nice to see you. In order to let proper healing occur, what we essentially want to see is that we actually have some level of movement as well. And the reason being is that the tissues actually will lose a lot of their strength if you completely stop using them. So when we talk about relative rest and a little bit of movement, what we essentially mean is that you want to keep yourself mobile, you want to keep yourself walking, you want to keep yourself actually relatively active, whether that means getting on a bike. What we want to avoid is activities that are specifically going to upset the tissues in question. E.g., if we had a lower back issue and we were doing a lot of bending and lifting, this is probably going to be counterintuitive. However, if you've got a lot of lower back pain, what we basically know is that realistically, any more than 48 hours of bed rest, people are actually going to progress the level of their condition. So you want to keep yourself mobile, you want to keep those tissues moving. It actually helps, again, that blood flow into the area and actually start to help improve those tissue healing times. Number 4, a lot of people will forget about this. This is your diet. Most people will forget that actually we are what we eat. If we're eating poor quality foods, it's a little bit like a car. If you're putting the wrong fuel in, if you have a petrol car and you put diesel in, you try to turn the ignition on, guess what? You're going nowhere. And your body is exactly the same. Our body is designed to thrive off of natural foods. These are whole foods. And what we basically know with pain, fresh fruits, vegetables, fiber are really going to help to reduce that inflammation process. Some other things that are really essential in reducing the inflammatory process and reducing pain are things like magnesium, omega-3 oils, stuff like vitamin D and our multivitamins. And the reason why these are so important, they reduce the amount of oxidation going on in our body, allowing our tissues to really speed up that healing process. The omega-3s allow the balances of certain fatty acids in our body, and again, really driving down that inflammatory process and really driving down the pain response. Number 5, something that again, people probably don't think about in association to pain, and that is hydration. So the volume of water that we're drinking is super important, especially when we start looking at something like our lumbar discs. Now our body is actually made up of roughly 70% water. So it's almost 3/4 water. And as a result, if we're almost 3/4 water, it makes so much sense to make sure that we've got the right levels of fluids in our body. So again, if we can look at an example, something like the low back, the discs are made up of water in the middle. Now, if we're hydrated, what we actually start to see is those discs can become dehydrated as well. So if you're not drinking enough water, your discs can actually be dehydrated. And actually, I think I read a journal that said that you can actually reduce your lower back pain by up to 20% just by maintaining your levels of hydration. And that basically means if you're drinking something like coffee or tea, which are both very heavily caffeinated, or things like soda, you're actually going to drop your water content down. And as a result, what you're going to have to do is actually consume some more water in order to boost those levels back up again. So those would be my 5 biggest tips. I'm just going to reiterate those. Use of hot and cold, plenty of rest, keeping the joints or tissues in question mobile, making sure that we're balancing our diet and getting enough of the right nutrients and whole foods into our body, staying well hydrated. And I've got one bonus one for you guys. This is the big bonus. If none of these things are working for you, this is where you need to go. You need to seek a professional's advice. Because if the tissues are simply not healing on their own, there is something bigger or something larger at question here. And whether you seek professional advice from your physio, your chiropractor, your massage therapist, or your GP, you need to go and have something like this assessed if it's not resolving based on changes in your lifestyle, your diet, etc. There is something bigger and large, and the longer we procrastinate about something, the worse it's potentially going to get. Guys, I hope you found some value in these tips. If you've got any questions, post them in the comments below. Look, our phone lines are open. Our email is open. We're here to support you guys. If there's anything you need, we are back in the clinic. We are making limited appointments available for people. If you want to take advantage of being able to get into the clinic now, please just give us a phone. We'd be happy to see you. And it's been such a pleasure to go back into the clinic from the 1st of May and actually serve so many people over the first couple of days. Thank you so much for all coming in. We'll speak to you again soon.